Hello students. In the today's class we'll discuss about Parkinson's disease, symptoms of Parkinson's disease, its etiology, that is the various causes behind the disease, and the most important of all, pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease. Now, Parkinson's disease is a neurological disease. It is characterized by progressive loss of control and coordination of body movements. Body movements are neither controlled nor they are properly coordinated, and this results in altered abnormal body movements. And this disease is caused due to the degeneration of dopaminergic neurons in substantia nigra. Substantia nigra is a part of basal ganglia, and basal ganglia is a group of basal nuclei which are found to be present in the brain. So basically it is caused because of the degeneration of dopaminergic neurons. Now first and the most important, that how do we exactly characterize the Parkinson's disease? What are the symptoms of Parkinson's disease? Now classic motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease. First and the most important are the resting tremors. Now tremors, as we can understand, are the certain slight involuntary shaking movements, and these involuntary movements of muscles, they are seen first in the fingers. The body parts that are mostly affected are the fingers, thumb, then apart from that hand and chin. So these are the areas where the resting tremors are seen, and these tremors are called as resting tremors because once the person starts moving, these tremors, they stop on their own. So one of the classic motor symptom is a resting tremors. Second classic motor symptom is a rigidity or stiffness. Rigidity or stiffness is the inability of muscles to relax normally. And since the body muscles are not relaxing normally, there is pain in the muscles, and it becomes difficult for the person to move these muscles. So the person is not able to work properly, person is not able to walk properly because there is pain in the muscles. So that is termed as a rigidity or stiffness of the muscles. The muscles, they become very tight, they are not relaxing normally. Another very important motor symptom of Parkinson's disease is the bradykinesia. Bradykinesia means, kinesia refers to movements, brady refers to slow. So the body movements, they become very slow. Then hypokinesia, kinesia again refers to the movements. So hypokinesia refers to less movements. There are very less movements in the body. Akinesia, when the disease becomes severe and there is excessive loss of dopaminergic neurons, there can be akinesia. That means loss of all the body movements. There are no body movements and the person becomes bedridden. So these are the classic motor symptoms: resting tremors, rigidity or the stiffness of the muscles, bradykinesia, hypokinesia and akinesia. So these are the classic motor symptoms with the help of which we can characterize a patient of Parkinson's disease. Other very important feature or the secondary manifestations of these motor symptoms is the gait. Gaiting is the manner of walking, the manner in which the person walks. So the person doesn't walk normally. The body loses the balance and the body, it leans forward. So there is change in the gait. The body, there is stooping or the hunching. There's stooping or hunching, that is the leaning forward of the body, and because of the leaning forward of the body, there is also a problem with the balance. The balance of the body also get disturbed. This is also one of the very important features of the Parkinson's disease. The person doesn't walk normally and there is stooping or hunching, leaning forward of the body. Then micrographia, the handwriting becomes very small. Again it is a motor problem related with the movement of the muscles. Now some of the very important non-motor problems are difficulty in sleeping, because it is the cortex which is affected. There is loss of sensation of smell. Now masked face. Now because of the bradykinesia, hypokinesia, akinesia, there are reduced facial expressions. the facial expressions are reduced because there are reduced body movements, and because of which the patient or the person looks very serious, or the person looks as if the person is staring in one direction. So the face is referred to as a masked face. This is also a very important characteristic feature of the Parkinson's patient. Slurred speech, the voice becomes very soft, the voice becomes very low. And now in many of the cases, dizziness or fainting can be seen. It is because of the fall in blood pressure, because there is deficiency of dopamine, and deficiency of dopamine results in the fall in blood pressure. Apart from this, there are certain cognition impairment. There is impairment of impairment of the ability to judge, to take decisions, to plan, to give proper response, and even there is difficulty in memorizing the things, memorizing the incidences, past incidences, the distant incidences, or the new incidences. So there is certain cognition impairment also seen when the disease advances. Apart from this, mood and behavior changes can also be seen in the patient. So these are some of the characteristic features, characteristic symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Now coming to the etiology, the causes. In majority of the cases, Parkinson's disease is idiopathic. The causes, in most of the cases, the cause is not clear. Now Parkinson's disease can be caused because of the exposure of the body to toxins like MPTP, that is N-methyl 4-phenyl tetrahydropyridine. Then exposure to pesticides, agricultural and household pesticides can also damage the neurons, resulting in the Parkinson's disease. And a very important cause can be stroke, that is ischemia of the brain. Head injury, where the neurons are damaged, dopaminergic neurons are damaged. So these are some of the causes of Parkinson's disease. Now we'll talk about the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease. Now let's talk about the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease. Now earlier I have told you that Parkinson's disease is caused due to the deficiency of dopaminergic neurons. Now before understanding the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease, it is very important for us to understand normal physiological activity that controls and coordinate the body movements. So in order to understand normal physiological activity, it is very important for us to understand this slide. Now this slide shows certain loop circuits. These are the loop circuits. These are the circuits I have shown over here. This is one circuit, another circuit, third circuit. So these loop circuits are operational in the basal ganglia, and these loop circuits, they provide information to the motor cortex. Now motor cortex further provides information to the spinal cord, and depending upon the information received by the spinal cord, the muscle contracts. Either they contract forcefully, or the contractions are very weak. It all depends upon the signals which are received by the spinal cord from the motor cortex. So one thing here very important to note is this, that it is the circuits in the basal ganglia, they provide feedback to the motor cortex. Motor cortex further provide information to the spinal cord, and then spinal cord then controls the contraction of skeletal muscles, and this contraction, it can be weak, it can be powerful, depending upon the signals that are received. Now first we'll talk about this loop circuit. This loop circuit is called as the direct pathway. Now in this loop circuit, now let me first tell you what is the basal ganglia. Now basal ganglia are a group of nuclei in the brain. Basal ganglia are a group of nuclei in the brain. Now different parts of the basal ganglia are, first part is the striatum. This I have shown here in the red color, in the pink color. So this is the striatum. It is a part of the basal ganglia. Another part of the basal ganglia is the substantia nigra. This is the substantia nigra. This substantia nigra, it is divided into substantia nigra pars compacta and substantia nigra pars reticulata. Then globus pallidus internal, it is also closely associated with the substantia nigra. This globus pallidus internal, it is also a part of basal ganglia. Another part of basal ganglia is the globus pallidus external. Another part of the basal ganglia is the subthalamus. So this and this, these are the parts of the basal ganglia. Now these different parts of the basal ganglia, or the basal ganglia, is in very strong association with the thalamus and the motor cortex. Basal ganglia is in strong association with the thalamus and then the motor cortex. Now let's first understand this circuit. This circuit is called as the direct pathway, and this direct pathway, it controls the contraction of skeletal muscles. Now first of all, this is in the yellow color, is the motor cortex. Motor cortex is a part of cerebrum. It is a part of the cerebrum which is responsible for controlling the contraction of the muscles, which is responsible for body movements. Now this motor cortex, it stimulates the striatum. Now here there are three different types of neurons I have shown. Now in the black color I have shown excitatory neurons which release excitatory neurotransmitter, that is a glutamate. In the blue color I have shown inhibitory neurons. Inhibitory neurons are the one here which release GABA, that is a gamma aminobutyric acid, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So one type of neurons are in the black color, these are the excitatory neurons, and these release excitatory neurotransmitter, that is a glutamate. Another type of neurons which I have shown in this loop circuit are the blue color inhibitory neurons which release inhibitory neurotransmitter, that is GABA. And the third type of neurons which I have shown in this diagram are the dopaminergic neuron in the red color. So these are the dopaminergic neurons and they release dopamine. So first of all, this motor cortex, it stimulates the striatum, and this is the excitatory neuron. So this neuron is depolarized, and when this neuron is depolarized, there is release of glutamate in the striatum. In the striatum there is release of glutamate. Now very important thing to note over here is this, that glutamate, it is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It binds to binds to the post synaptic membrane. That means it binds to its receptors on this GABAergic neuron. So it binds to its receptors on this GABAergic neuron, and once it has binded itself to its receptors, it causes induction of excitatory postsynaptic potential, because glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It induces opening of the calcium channels. There is influx of calcium ions in this GABAergic neuron, and there is induction of excitatory postsynaptic potential in this GABAergic neuron. And because of the induction of excitatory postsynaptic potential in this GABAergic neuron, there is increase in action potential, which is caused by the glutamate, and there is depolarization of this GABAergic neuron. Now once this GABAergic neuron in the striatum is depolarized, there is release of GABA. There is release of GABA in the globus pallidus internal. So here we find that there is release of GABA. GABA is released here in sufficient amount. So there is release of GABA in the globus pallidus internal. Now GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Since it is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, it induces inhibitory postsynaptic potential. Now when this GABA is released, it binds to its postsynaptic membrane on this neuron, on the next neuron. Again, the next neuron is again a GABAergic neuron in globus pallidus internal, and it releases its neurotransmitter in the thalamus. Now this neuron is connected from the globus pallidus internal to the thalamus. So when the GABA binds to its receptors, it binds to its receptors on this GABAergic next neuron, and after binding to its receptors, it induces inhibitory postsynaptic potential. And since it is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, it induces inhibitory postsynaptic potential. It causes opening of the chloride channels, and because of the opening of the chloride channels, that is a fall in the membrane potential, there is hyperpolarization. Now because of the hyperpolarization, because of the inhibitory generation of inhibitory postsynaptic potential, because of the hyperpolarization, there is fall in action potential. And because of the fall in the action potential, there is release of less amount of GABA. This I have shown over here. There is release of less amount of GABA. There is release of less amount of GABA at the thalamus. Now, since it's very important to note over here is this, that since the GABA is released in the less amount, this GABA, it binds to its next neuron, which is an excitatory neuron in the thalamus. So whatsoever amount of GABA is released, it binds to its receptors on the postsynaptic membrane of this neuron, and this neuron is an excitatory neuron. So since the GABA is released here in the less amount, it induces less inhibitory postsynaptic potential. It induces since it induces less inhibitory postsynaptic potential. In other words, we can say that it induces excitatory postsynaptic potential. It causes excitation of this neuron. It releases this neuron, that is the next neuron, from the inhibition. So since GABA is produced in less amount, it induces less inhibitory postsynaptic potential. In other words, we can say it increases excitatory postsynaptic potential. It increases the action potential. So it binds to this neuron, and after binding to this neuron, it causes excitatory postsynaptic potential. It induces action potential. It releases this neuron from inhibition, and this neuron, which is an excitatory neuron, it is depolarized. And when this excitatory neuron is depolarized, it releases its neurotransmitter, that is the excitatory neurotransmitter glutamate, in the motor cortex. Now this glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, it is released in the motor cortex. It stimulates the spinal cord, and spinal cord causes contraction of the skeletal muscles. So this is a normal physiology of contraction of skeletal muscles, which is controlled by the direct pathway. So this is a normal mechanism how the direct pathway controls the contraction of skeletal muscles. Now we will study the influence of dopamine, how dopamine controls this pathway. Now actually dopamine kicks this pathway. Dopamine is responsible for enhancing these contractions of the skeletal muscles. There are enhanced powerful contraction of the skeletal muscles in the presence of dopamine. Dopamine further causes enhanced powerful contraction of the skeletal muscles. So dopamine kicks this pathway and makes the contractions of the skeletal muscles more strong. So now let's see how that happens. Now this dopamine, these dopaminergic neurons, they are found to be present in the substantia nigra pars compacta. Now when these dopaminergic neurons, they are stimulated, these dopaminergic neurons, they release dopamine in the striatum. That means this dopaminergic neuron, it connects the substantia nigra with the striatum, and therefore this pathway is also called as a nigrostriatal pathway. So dopaminergic neurons, when they are stimulated, they release dopamine in the striatum. Now in the striatum are present dopamine D1 receptors, and dopamine D1 receptors are excitatory receptors. These are G protein coupled receptors, GS type, and these are the excitatory receptors. So dopamine binds to its D1 excitatory receptors. Now after binding to its dopaminergic stimulatory D1 receptors, what the dopamine does is this, that dopamine kicks the entire pathway. It makes the contractions even stronger. How the dopamine does that? Let's see to it. Now dopamine, what it does is this, that it further enhances excitatory postsynaptic potential, which is produced by the glutamate. Dopamine enhances the excitatory postsynaptic potential, which is induced by the glutamate. It causes enhanced depolarization, which results in the more release of GABA. That means what we can see over here is this, that dopamine, it stimulates this entire pathway. In the presence of dopamine, there is enhanced release of GABA. Now there is enhanced depolarization, there is enhanced excitatory postsynaptic potential, because dopaminergic D1 receptors are the stimulatory receptors. So there is enhanced release of GABA. Now since there is enhanced release of GABA, there is more inhibition, there is more opening of the chloride channels, there is increase in the hyperpolarization. So this GABAergic neuron, which is reaching the thalamus, it is further inhibited. There is furthermore enhanced hyperpolarization, and because of the inhibition or hyperpolarization of this GABAergic neuron, there is further reduction in the release of GABA in the presence of dopamine. And now, since there is further reduction in the release of GABA at the thalamus, there is further reduction in the inhibitory postsynaptic potential of the next neuron. So here there is further reduction in the release of GABA. GABA is produced in the less amount in the presence of dopamine, and this GABA, which is produced in the less amount, it binds to its next neuron, which is the excitatory neuron. Now, since the GABA is further produced in the less amount, there is less of inhibition of this neuron, and we can say that there is enhanced excitation or there is enhanced generation of excitatory postsynaptic potential in the presence of dopamine. So, earlier there was induction of action potential. Now there is further increase in the action potential, there is further increase in the generation of excitatory postsynaptic potential, and this results in the enhanced release of glutamate. Now, since there is enhanced release of glutamate in the presence of dopamine, there is further strong signals are provided to the spinal cord, and when the strong feedback is provided to the spinal cord in the presence of dopamine, there are enhanced powerful contraction of the skeletal muscles in the presence of dopamine. That means dopamine kicks the entire pathway, and the contraction of skeletal muscles, they become more powerful in the presence of dopamine. So after discussing this pathway, this is the direct pathway, and since the dopamine stimulates this pathway is also called as the stimulatory pathway. Now we'll talk about the second pathway, that is the indirect pathway. Now we'll talk about the indirect pathway, that is the inhibitory pathway. Now this all the loop and the various parts of the basal ganglia. Now this is a motor cortex. I have shown over here in the yellow color. This motor cortex, it stimulates the striatum. It stimulates the striatum, and there is a release of glutamate. Now, as we had discussed earlier, glutamate, since it is an excitatory neurotransmitter, it binds to its next neuron, which is the GABAergic neuron, shown here in the blue color. So this glutamate, it binds to its GABAergic neuron, and glutamate induces excitatory postsynaptic potential. It causes influx of calcium ions in this GABAergic neuron. It induces increase in action potential, and because of which this GABAergic neuron is depolarized. And when this GABAergic neuron is depolarized, there is a release of GABA. Now this GABA, it is released at globus pallidus external, so which is a part of basal ganglia. So GABA, inhibitory neurotransmitter, it is released at the globus pallidus external. Now this GABA, it binds to the receptors on the next neuron. Next neuron is again a GABAergic neuron. Now this GABA, it binds to its next neuron, and this GABA, since it is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, it causes opening of the chloride channel. There is opening of chloride channel in this neuron. It induces inhibitory postsynaptic potential, and since it induces inhibitory postsynaptic potential, there is fall in action potential. And there is less amount of GABA produced. So GABA is released here in the less amount because there was inhibition of action potential. So here I have shown over here. So GABA is released over here at the subthalamus. Subthalamus is also a part of basal ganglia. So GABA is produced here in the less amount. Now since GABA is an inhibitory neuron, since it is produced in the less amount, it binds to its next neuron, but it causes induction of less inhibitory postsynaptic potential. Since it causes induction of less inhibitory postsynaptic potential, we can say it causes induction of excitatory postsynaptic potential. So this less amount of GABA, it binds to its receptor on this neuron, which I have shown here in the black color. This is an excitatory neuron. So less GABA binds to this neuron. There is less induction of inhibitory postsynaptic potential. In other words, there is induction of excitatory postsynaptic potential. There is rise in action potential, and glutamate is this cell undergoes depolarization, and glutamate is released over here. Glutamate is released at globus pallidus internal. Now this glutamate, it binds to its next neuron. Next neuron is a blue neuron. It is a GABAergic neuron. So glutamate, it is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It binds to the next neuron. It induces excitatory postsynaptic potential. It induces increase in the action potential, and it causes depolarization of this GABAergic neuron, and which is connected to the thalamus. So by induction of depolarization, by the induction of excitatory postsynaptic potential, by the rise in the action potential, it causes release of GABA here at the thalamus. Now here the GABA is released at the thalamus. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It induces inhibitory postsynaptic potential. So this GABA, it binds to its next neuron. Next neuron I have shown in the black color. So it is an excitatory neuron. So the GABA, it binds to its neuron. It induces opening of the chloride channels. There is fall in the membrane potential. There is induction of inhibitory postsynaptic potential in this neuron. There is fall in action potential. There is hyperpolarization, and because of inhibitory postsynaptic potential and hyperpolarization, this excitatory neuron, it releases less amount of glutamate. So less amount of glutamate is released in the motor cortex. Now, since less amount of glutamate is released in the motor cortex, we can say there is inhibition of contraction of skeletal muscles. So this feedback that less amount of glutamate is released in the motor cortex, this information is received by the skeletal muscles, and now the skeletal muscles contract, but the contraction is weak. So if we compare this with the direct pathway, in the direct pathway, compared to the indirect pathway, there was more release of glutamate. Since there was more release of glutamate, the contraction of skeletal muscles was comparatively forceful. But here, since there is less release of glutamate, glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter, contraction of skeletal muscles is weak. So this is a normal physiology. So normally the indirect pathway, it inhibits the contraction of skeletal muscles, whereas the direct pathway, it causes the contraction of skeletal muscles. Now direct pathway was further stimulated by the presence of dopamine, and in the presence of dopamine, these contraction of the skeletal muscles, they become very powerful. Now when we talk about the indirect pathway is an inhibitory pathway. The contraction of skeletal muscles is very weak. Now after this, we will talk about the same indirect pathway and the influence of dopamine on this pathway. Now what the dopamine does is this: the dopamine kicks the pathway. The dopamine makes these contractions powerful. So now we'll talk about this pathway, that is the influence of dopamine on the indirect. Now let's study the influence of dopamine on this indirect pathway. This indirect pathway is kicked by the dopamine, and the contractions which were earlier weak, these contractions, they become comparatively powerful in the presence of dopamine. Now how the dopamine does that, let's see to it. Now this is a motor cortex. Motor cortex by means of the excitatory neurons stimulates the striatum, and there is a release of glutamate. Now dopaminergic neurons, they are found to be present in the substantia nigra. Now this nigra, it is connected to the striatum, therefore this pathway is called as a nigrostriatal pathway. Now when these dopaminergic neurons, they are stimulated, there is a release of dopamine in the striatum. Now one very important thing to note over here is this, that here the dopamine binds to its D2 receptors in the striatum, and these D2 receptors are G protein coupled inhibitory receptors. So by binding to the dopamine D2 receptors, what dopamine does is this: the dopamine inhibits this pathway. Dopamine inhibits this GABAergic neuron. There is inhibition of this GABAergic neuron in the presence of dopamine. Now because of the inhibition of this GABAergic neuron, there is less release of GABA. Now since there is less release of GABA, this GABA which is produced here in the less amount, it binds to its next GABAergic neuron. Now since the GABA here is produced in less amount, there is less inhibition of this neuron. Less inhibition of this neuron means there is less of inhibitory postsynaptic potential. In other words, there is more of excitatory postsynaptic potential. In other words, there is induction of action potential. So there is rise in action potential, and because of which here there is sufficient amount of GABA is produced. Now this sufficient amount of GABA, it binds to its next neuron, which is an excitatory neuron. It binds to its neuron, and since sufficient amount of GABA is produced, it binds to its next neuron, which is the excitatory neuron. This GABA, it causes opening of the chloride channels. It causes fall in the membrane potential. It induces inhibitory postsynaptic potential. It induces hyperpolarization, and because of which there is inhibition of this excitatory neuron, and less amount of glutamate is produced. So less amount of glutamate is produced in the presence of dopamine. Now this less amount of glutamate, it binds to its next neuron, which is in blue, that is the GABAergic neuron. So this less glutamate means less excitation, means less of excitatory postsynaptic potential, means less of action potential. So this less of glutamate, it binds to its next neuron, and this less glutamate causes less action potential, causes less excitatory postsynaptic potential, and therefore after binding to this GABAergic neuron, what it does is this, that there is reduced release of GABA at the thalamus. Now since there is reduced release of GABA at the thalamus, this reduced amount of GABA, it binds to its next neuron, that is the excitatory neuron. So less of GABA means less of inhibition of this excitatory neuron, less of inhibition, less of inhibitory postsynaptic potential. In other words, more of excitatory postsynaptic potential. In other words, increase in action potential, increase in depolarization. So there is increase in the excitatory postsynaptic potential in this excitatory neuron, and therefore in the presence of dopamine, there is increased release of glutamate. So in the absence of dopamine, there was less release of glutamate, but in the presence of dopamine, there is more release of glutamate. Now since more release of glutamate is produced over here, the signals which are received by the spinal cord are strong. There is stronger contraction of skeletal muscles. So dopamine, it kicks the indirect pathway, and the contractions which were earlier weak, now they become very strong in the presence of dopamine. So this is the effect of dopamine on both the pathways. Dopamine kicks the direct pathway, and the contraction of skeletal muscles are they become more powerful. Similarly, dopamine kicks the indirect pathway, and the weak contractions now become comparatively strong. So by acting on direct pathway as well as on the indirect pathway, the dopamine causes strong contractions of the skeletal muscles. So this is the normal physiology. Now what happens in the Parkinson's disease? Parkinson's disease is a disease where there is degeneration of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra. So there is dopamine neurons are present in the substantia nigra pars compacta. So there is degeneration of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra pars compacta. So there is less availability of dopamine. So there is less kicking of this pathway. So there is comparatively less production of glutamate. So comparatively less stronger contractions of skeletal muscles. Similarly, when we talk about this pathway again, because of the Parkinson's disease, there is degeneration of dopaminergic neuron in the substantia nigra. So less availability of dopamine in the striatum, less availability of dopamine on the D2 receptors, because of which there is less release of glutamate, and the contractions of the skeletal muscles, they are very weak. So In the absence of dopamine, due to the degeneration of dopaminergic neurons in the Parkinson's disease, these contractions, the contractions of the skeletal muscles, they become weak. And because of which, in the mild cases, in the initial stages of Parkinson's disease, there is bradykinesia, that is less movements. There is bradykinesia and there is hypokinesia. But as the disease progresses, the slow movements, the less movements, they change into akinesia, that is no movements. So the main cause behind the symptom, classical symptom of Parkinson's disease, that is bradykinesia, akinesia or hypokinesia, is the deficiency of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra. So this is how the dopamine controls and coordinates the contraction of skeletal muscles, and deficiency of dopamine results in first bradykinesia and hypokinesia, followed by akinesia. So there is deficiency of dopamine. Another very important thing to note over here is this, that in the central nervous system, since there is deficiency of dopamine, there becomes an imbalance between the levels of dopamine and the levels of acetylcholine. In the Parkinson's disease, there is found to be deficiency of dopamine, but on the other hand, there is upregulation of acetylcholine. There is increase in the acetylcholine. Now let's see to it that what happens. I have summarized the pathogenesis of Parkinson's disease in this slide. And now this I have already discussed in detail, that degeneration of dopaminergic neurons in substantia nigra pars compacta. That is deficiency of dopamine in the nigrostriatal dopaminergic tract, that is a tract which connects substantia nigra with the striatum. There is deficiency of dopaminergic neurons, and which results in the deficiency of dopamine in the basal ganglia. And because of the deficiency of dopamine in the basal ganglia, there is bradykinesia, there is hypokinesia, and there is also akinesia. So bradykinesia, hypokinesia, akinesia are slow movements, less movements, and no movements. These are caused basically because of the deficiency of dopamine. So, and apart from this, a deficiency of dopamine in the basal ganglia produces an imbalance between the availability of dopamine and acetylcholine. Now, because of the persistent deficiency of dopamine, that is the inhibitory neurotransmitter, there is found to be increase in the availability of acetylcholine in the brain. So there is an imbalance, there is fall in the levels of dopamine, and there is rise in the level of acetylcholine. Fall in the levels of dopamine is responsible for bradykinesia, that is a slow movements, hypokinesia, that is a less movements, akinesia, that is no movements. This already we have discussed in detail. And increase in the levels of acetylcholine results in the resting tremors, that is involuntary shaking movements, which are first found to be seen in the hands, in the fingers, thumb, followed by hand and chin. And these tremors, they subside or they stop on their own when the person starts moving. So therefore these tremors are called as the resting tremors. These resting tremors are caused because of the increase in acetylcholine. And rigidity, that is the stiffness of the muscles, they're unable to relax, muscles are unable to relax normally. This rigidity is also caused because of the acetylcholine. So three classical motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease. First is the bradykinesia, hypokinesia, akinesia. It is caused due to the deficiency of dopamine, whereas the resting tremors and rigidity, they are caused due to the increase in the acetylcholine. Now, I hope that you must have understood what exactly is the Parkinson's disease, what are the various symptoms by which we can characterize the Parkinson's disease, etiology, what can be the causes. The cause, in most of the cases, it is idiopathic, the cause is not known, and the most important, pathophysiology, that is the degeneration of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra, and how this degeneration affects the control and coordination of the skeletal muscles and how it results in Parkinson's disease. Thank you for watching this video.